It's me, Sean Capri, and welcome to We the GamerCast. It publishes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play every single Monday. Thank you for subscribing, for being here, for telling your friend, for telling your mom, for telling your dad, for telling your friend, and your mom's friend, and your friend's dad. All the people, guys. I am on the struggle bus. Oh my! I was, even as the music was going, I'm like, am I really doing this? Goodness gracious. Man cold, man flu, COVID test came back negative, but I'm in it, man. So we're gonna do this. And the thing is, I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this episode. I need you to listen to this episode, so I'm gonna step out of the way in just a moment. But if you're new, here's the deal. Every week I have sweet hangs with a stranger from the internet, and we talk about life and video games. And if you want to be on the show, you just tweet at me, at Sean Capri. Sean like Connery, Capri like the pants. What? I'm so like foggy, I don't even know if I said that right. I'm just going to keep rolling with it. I think I'm just bouncing off of and relying on some muscle memory here, you guys. Goodness gracious. Hopefully you guys are doing great. I've had a really good week aside from just kind of fighting this whole thing off. Last week we had Lord Sovereign on the show. Holy crap. So many wonderful people, wonderful comments and everything coming in from that. So thank you guys so much. And Will, this week, William Key, this is a great sort of just, I didn't know what to expect. Like many instances where I'm talking to a stranger from the internet, I don't know what is going to happen. And this one, I'm pleasantly surprised. So I'm gonna get into it in just a second. But before I do, I want to thank everybody who supports us at patreon.com/YouMeCapri. And I would love to have 1 or 2 or even 3 new people join in. Come on, we're almost at 70 patrons. Patreon.com/YouMeCapri. And I want to give a special thanks to our Capremium producers, Dallas Ford, Lee Navarro, the fearless leader of the Phoenix Overdrive Extra Life team, the team that I am on and you should join, and Jonathan Brown, the man behind the music on the Xbox Drive and the Nintendo Drive. And you can support Jonathan at youtube.com/PM Entertainment. Platinum producers, Robbie Bobby Miller and Trucker Sloth, and our gold members, Argo, Benji Kong, Brendan Myers, Dallas Robbins, Dano, Emily O'Kelly, Foolish Fuji, Joel Brooks, Jose Jimenez, Mac Time, Marcus O'Neill, Mr. and Mrs. Nasty Boots, RJ Kern, Skinny Matt, and Xavier Reyes. Now, you guys, some of you who've been listening to the show know that I like to just kind of go on here for a little bit. I'm not doing so good right this moment, man. I want to get into the amazing conversation. This is not an indication of how good the show is. So why don't I go ahead and introduce William Key, who reached out to me a while back, and just for scheduling reasons, it took until now to finally have him on the show. And this is a dedicated dude. I am enlightened by him. I am inspired by him. I hope you guys will be as well. You can follow him on Twitter at Will Key. That's 2 L's, 2 E's. Here he is, William Key. Where are you right now?
I'm actually at work.
I was going to say, you look like you're at work, so you've got like your studio on the go, man.
That's the way I've been running this entire time, so.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, I've been doing my podcast specifically from work ever since Finn came into the world.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, I don't have really a office space at home. Mm-hmm. And so it's with him being so young, it's been kind of hard to always guarantee I can record at the same time.
No doubt.
Every week.
Yeah.
But at least at work, I'm kind of in control of that. So
I've
kind of got my own little space that I've got just designated for just recording podcasts.
This is new, man. This is a well, I shouldn't say a first, because actually Ryan Turford, I recorded at least one podcast with him at his work out in Toronto. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if I really should be sharing that or not.
As long as you don't dox him, right? You don't say where he works.
Oh, I know, and it's like, okay. People can probably like start to put that together if if you listen to enough. You could probably say that. But who knows? Maybe this is the part of the show that I don't include. I don't know, man.
That's okay.
I am fascinated by the commitment though of can't do it at home, so I'll set up an audio. Like you legit have like a microphone. Like at your office, man. Like at your work.
It's actually, it's my microphone, my audio mixer. It's everything that
Your mixer.
Yeah, I don't know if I can. It's like a little tiny dinky mixer.
Get out of here! Holy cow,
so
man!
I brought it with me. It's portable enough. I have a bag, and I leave it in my locker at work. And every Friday when I go to record, I just pull it out, put it on my desk, and then I just record on my break.
Oh my God.
Put it away when I'm all done.
I feel like I should do like a series on this of some sort. Like I'd love to like get like even just like 5 to 7 minute stories from people like you, because there's other people as well who kind of just like do whatever it takes to like get it done. There's like the passion is there, the commitment is there. Kato from the Nintendo Drive will tell me about her, like she's got like a little cart that she kind of like brings in, because same idea, like shared space, trying to create content with a family it's tricky stuff, man. Like it's no joke. So I appreciate the dedication, dude.
Well, and the other thing too is so currently my wife and I, we're living with her in-laws right now.
Okay.
Using that as an opportunity to save money to buy a house.
You. Yeah.
So when we moved out there, we didn't realize that her parents don't have internet. So
None.
that has
no
been,
internet.
No internet. So that has been another struggle with this whole recording the podcast thing, because how do you record in a space that doesn't have internet?
Oh,
we've been
my
renting.
God.
We've been renting like portable MiFi boxes from the library.
Stop.
Yeah, and so we get those we get them for like 2 weeks at a time.
Yeah.
But even then, like it's very spotty.
Because that's somehow more like you couldn't just like say, hey, we'll get the internet here. Like you couldn't like I don't know what if that would be overstepping or anything.
So it's weird. So where they live in sort of like a gully, and I guess their neighbor, who's like up the hill a bit, is just able to reach a lot of the cell towers and everything to get like half decent internet.
Oh, legit! Like it's not even like a choice of theirs. It's not like they just like cut the cable or something like that. It's just the internet doesn't go there. Like there's no service.
Yeah, and it's like it's gonna cost like maybe $500 to stick a tower on the property,
right?
And they don't really want to do it.
Well,
They're just
of course.
like, it's like more money that they don't really want to spend. But they didn't realize it was an issue until we came in, and at our age, we're using internet a lot, right? Mm-hmm. Especially for what we do for work. So it's been a challenge there. But they're also seeing it now because they wait until like the end of their billing cycle to watch and download all the Netflix shows on whatever data they have left on their phones, basically. So they're just scraping by with that.
That is what it sounds like. Obviously, there's more to life than internet, but it does seem like, I've done a couple of moves, and, in the age of the internet, it seems like you're not really fully settled into your new space until the internet guy comes around and kind of like fires everything up. Like, it's such a weird thing, even though we do have, our phones and everything are all connected. It's just like firing up a computer or a laptop or whatever it is seems like just, I don't know, more complete, I guess, is the only way I can really describe it. It's, oh man, how long have you been living like that for?
I'd say about 1.5 years now.
Yeah. So is there any getting used to it, or is it always, you've always been with internet? Is there any getting used to living without internet?
Yeah. Thankfully they have cable.
Sure.
So we can just watch a lot of like TV. We got really big into like 90 Day Fiance, The Bachelor, Survivor. Like I just hopped on to everything that my wife was watching, and all the other cable shows. And then when we get the portable MiFi, then we go to town. I download everything in my backlog for Netflix, everything for like PlayStation, anything that has just been sitting in a download.
Sure.
I can just access. Yeah.
You really have to plan it ahead. I would have like lists and everything, like notebooks and everything, just like ready to go. Okay, when I get my internet, I'm going to be doing these things, because it kind of reminds me of when I first got internet, honestly, like when I got like dial up, and I don't know if you were like had this situation as well, but like we had, I don't know what it was, like maybe 100 minutes a month or something. Like it was measured in minutes, right? And as soon as you dialed into it, it was like the countdown was on. Like you need to know you're going to this place, and then you're going to this place, and then that's it. You got to make sure that you cut it off. It was almost like calling long distance, but with internet, man. Yeah.
And I think, I'm a couple of years younger than you, so if anything, that might have been a struggle that my parents dealt with a bit more. But I went to town on the internet when I was younger. I didn't even care Like really, I was downloading everything.
Yeah.
I was on the internet all the time. So I can't imagine what their bill must have been like. But now I'm kind of like, oh no, now I have to pay the bill. This is I got to watch what I'm watching, watch what I'm downloading.
Now it's data caps for some people. We're lucky enough that we don't have any data caps here. So I just kind of I'm in this situation I feel like I was eventually meant to be here in terms of content creation and just completely and undeniably, inescapably connected to the internet and reliant and dependent on the internet just for everything. Like it runs my calendars. It runs, this, of course, like so many things. It's like I am interacting with the internet far too often, actually. So I'm really kind of intrigued by this notion of maybe there's a way to, I'm being hyperbolic, but there's obviously a way to survive without internet. Like it seems kind of nice, actually.
And that's the thing too, is I definitely enjoy those moments where I feel I can disconnect.
Yeah.
And at least with the option of data, I'm not completely cut off,
Totally.
But I know that there's a limit to how much I can use before I cap out and everything runs slower.
Sure. Yeah.
But I do look forward to the day that when we do finally get our own space and I can get the home office set up, which I've been talking about with my wife for years. When I can finally get the home office set up, set up all the nice collectibles on the wall and make it really look nice, get my equipment all upgraded and everything like that.
Yeah.
Then I'll be okay.
Yeah, man. It's nice to look forward to it, dude. That's awesome, man. So, I've been doing a little bit of digging around in some of I was listening to some of your podcasts and reading some of your blog and stuff. I'm curious, like this. I'm actually quite surprised to hear this part of the story because some of the blog posts I was reading, it sounds like things have been a bit of a struggle to like kind of get started. So now it's just like you obviously found a different gear. You obviously found something else to get over whatever struggles you were having before. So maybe kind of like walk me through some of the challenges you were seeing before and getting started with creativity, but now you're on you're doing your regular podcast. You've kind of got things flowing. Do you feel like things are better? And how did you get there?
I definitely say it's a lot better now.
Good for
and
you.
I think in the past with a lot of the content I was making, I think I was relying too much on getting other people to kind of help me with it. Whereas I realized for most of the content I was making, whether it be on YouTube, through a blog, through podcasting, I was always kind of the consistent driving force for whatever project I was working on.
Yep.
So I thought to myself, I'm just kind of holding myself back, basically, if I'm, holding out for somebody else to come and help me with the content.
Sure. Yeah.
What's stopping me from just sitting down and doing it myself?
Yeah.
So it just basically came down to, well, I have the equipment. I've done this before. I have the voice. I have the ability to write the script.
Yeah.
Just sit down and do it.
Yeah.
And so I did it. And I started this podcast, funny enough, just before COVID took off.
Yeah.
Like last February. And my name, the podcast, it's called the Outbreak Podcast. So poor name aside, it kind of fell behind in sort of the search for everything that had to do with COVID and
you started it before
stuff.
that, like that was an actual accident that you called it the Outbreak, and then there's this pandemic.
Yes, exactly. I didn't really plan for that, but Outbreak has always kind of been a word that's been associated with my quote unquote brand.
Sure.
It's because funny enough, stems back to an old Resident Evil game.
Nice.
Outbreak on the PlayStation that I was a huge fan of, and I'm still a huge advocate for them remaking that game somehow for current gen consoles, even though there's no chance in hell that they're looking to do it because of it's never going to be the way it was back in the day. Like that game was, I think, one of the last games to sort of implement the fixed camera.
Sure.
And so they've gone kind of with first person these days. That's sort of in this new era of Resident Evil games.
Still got the callbacks for the remakes, though, too, don't they? I don't know. Does that sort of scratch the same itch? Are you still good with where they are, where they're at with the remakes with 2 and 3? Kind of a reimagining.
I like that they're finally doing 2 and 3 because it felt like for a long time, and I think a lot of my frustration around that series was that it did feel like they were just kind of recycling Resident Evil 1 over and over again for all the new consoles, and I'm like, as soon as I hear that they're porting it to like the Wii U, and I was like, oh my God, like this game is like 20 years old and it's they're still trying to sell it to the console on a disc. Like, why don't we touch something else? And then eventually they announced that they're going to do Resident Evil 2. And I'm like, okay, this should be good.
Yeah. Then
Resident Evil 7 took off and I'm like, okay, that's amazing. But it seemed like after the release of PT that like it seemed like Resident Evil saw success with that. They were like, okay, we could use that as sort of inspiration for our games. And then they just, they've been flying high ever since. Like,
I have to say that you have a similar like kind of glimmer in your eye when you talk about Resident Evil that Ryan Turford gets when he talks about Final Fantasy 14 or World of Warcraft or some of the others. Like this one's special to you, isn't it?
It definitely, and I think it all goes back to Outbreak because I was playing that. I was like 12 or 13. So like before like internet really was like good on like Xbox and PlayStation 3. I mean, it was all a work in progress, but on like the PS2, it was like you had to have a network adapter to play. You were never guaranteed a full play session because, if it was kind of part dial-up internet too. So if your parents got on the phone, you were kicked out of a server.
Yeah.
So, but it was a lot of fun, and I will always sing praises of that game to anybody who asks me, especially anybody who asks me, well, why do you use Outbreak in your name for everything? Yeah. Like, well, that's why.
I love that. I love that because it's not like you don't really hear that every day. You often hear about like maybe some of the more mainline. If you're going to hear anything about Resident Evil, you're definitely going to hear one of those. Like it's a deep cut, man. Like that's obviously, and you made me think of something I just jotted down here. I think all of us should look back to the games that were coming out when we were 12 or 13 years old. What year was that for any of us? And I feel like there may be something there. Like if we're, I don't know that, because I don't know that I've ever really thought of that. For me, that would have been 1996, 1997. So, I mean, that's like N64, GoldenEye, I think Half-Life was somewhere in there as well, Unreal, maybe 98. So yeah, those are the games for me. When I think back to like some of my formative years, some of my most precious memories, like playing games, it was those years actually, as it turns out, 1996 through 1998. I feel like anybody gaming at that point in time probably having a good time. I think Ocarina of Time, oddly enough, was in and around there as well. But yeah,
it's hard not to look back fondly on those years for sure.
Right.
Like,
those specific years, but then also like, cause it changes obviously for everybody. Like when were you 12 or 13? Like, I think it's a question that everybody should ask themselves. So yeah, you said you're a little bit younger than me. I can't quite place Resident Evil Outbreak. Like when did that come out?
Resident Evil, the first one, 2003.
Okay. Yeah. So quite a bit different there. Yeah. What the heck else came out in 2003? Like, what were some of like the better games that came out in 2000 around that time when you're kind of in your pre-teen, early teen years, man?
Well, I mean, if I was still playing on the PlayStation, I know Resident Evil 4 was just around the corner. If I'm still thinking,
a lot of people jump to that. A lot of people jump to Resident Evil 4. Like my first time playing Resident Evil 4 was on the Wii, actually. Like playing with the full-on motion controls. Playing in my room, probably in college at some point in that time, if that makes any sense. I think so.
Funny enough, too, actually, now that I'm thinking about that, it's not even 2003, but I think 2005 for me was probably like a big year because it was sort of like the end. I was closing in on like the end of myself playing the PlayStation 2. Mm-hmm. A number of my favorite games, I think, came from that year. Like Shadow of the Colossus was 2005.
Oh, yeah, man.
Rockstar's like The Warriors came out in 2005.
I never played that one.
If you know the movie, the movie The Warriors that came out in 1979, so Rockstar makes this game centered around these characters in this movie The Warriors, but adds so much more like content to sort of give it sort of a backstory.
Yeah.
But then also, the game sort of takes place around the events of the movie as well.
And it's like a GTA like open world kind of thing. Like they did Bully and a couple others, or like was it sort of experimental?
It's not as much like GTA. It's probably a little more like Bully because it's like it has that feeling of an open world, but it's really not. It's sort of like an open world, but like kind of a linear story.
Sure. Yeah.
Like
that makes sense around that time. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was like a brawler. It was like a multiplayer brawler game, and you can kind of create your own gangs, and you can go into multiplayer events like King of the Hill, like a deathmatch. I don't recall it being online, but I remember, much like Outbreak, it felt like there was just so much content and so much replayability with the amount of stuff that they gave you.
Yeah.
That I think I spent hours and hours just, playing. I think the Warriors was probably one of the only games I actually got 100% completion on.
I love that. That's the thing. Like there's special games in our lineage that, for whatever reason, they compel us to just like beat the crap out of them, like play every damn inch of them, dude. Like that's so amazing. Like, and you really kind of got my mind rolling here, Will, a little bit. Like this is something I think we might have to partner on this a little bit. We might have to go reach out to some people about, and we can kind of like walk through your timeline here as well, like determining like what are some of the key moments or milestones in like a gamer's life. Really, it's like, what are some of your first games? That's often what we'll talk about here. But I do think like skipping to like your teenage years, like what were you playing around then? Like there's something to be said about that. So maybe there's like 3 things. It's like, what are some of your first gaming memories? Those are really special. What were you playing in your teen years? And then like what's in your kind of like adult life? Cause I think that you just look, the games themselves are going to change. And this question could be different for everybody because we're all kind of at different points in our lives. But yeah, dude, like I think this is kind of really neat. So let's jump to sort of like adult Will, like whatever that means for you. If it's like 18 or for me, like 36, when I became an adult, like what's a game that sort of like went like, okay, maybe there's that you're at a new point in your life. Maybe you're a new dad. Like, is there a game now that you're kind of playing that is representative, or maybe you'll look back in 10 years and go, yeah, my 30s or whatever you're at. I don't know. Like that's the game.
Yeah, so it's funny enough. I'd say the first half of this year, I put so many hours into Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah.
And I think it was just kind of pulling together as much like fragmented time as I could to play between dealing with a new baby, dealing with work.
Sure.
And like my work schedule being, 12 hours a day, 5 days a week.
God.
Rotating schedules, right? So this week I'm working nights doing 12 hours. So it's like, where can I find the time between that to really put in hours? So it took me about 6 months to actually finish the story of Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah.
So I'd say like, that's one that's like more recently come to mind. Otherwise it's like, I just got a Switch for my birthday this year.
Oh, nice.
So now I feel like I've got so much more to catch up on there.
No kidding.
I've been waiting for a Switch for years, and I, with my like birthday money, I got Pokemon Shield, I got Breath of the Wild, I got New Super Mario Brothers like U Deluxe. So I've got those 3 to kind of, satisfy my itch for now.
So are you able to tackle those because it's a Switch, because it's portable? Like, because it took you half a year to do Ghost, but that would have been stuck at home. Like, are you able to, like, because you just listed, like, based on your timeline, and I'm in a similar boat to you, like, it takes me months and months to finish these games. Like, you just listed, I think, 3 or 4 years worth of gameplay. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Are you more able to get to them now?
I'd say so. I find a way to make time, and I think now with Finn being at closing in on a year, and us kind of getting into more of a comfortable routine with him,
sure,
I've been able to sort of find those moments here and there to allow myself to play. I've been daunted by like bigger games like Ghost of Tsushima, though. I find that I'm going towards games that I feel like I can complete, games that are more like a 6 to 8 hour game rather than like a 20+ hour game. So right now I'm playing Infamous Second Son, which is a game that a friend lent me.
Yeah,
but
not a
I figured
game,
I was
sure.
Exactly. I was looking at that on my shelf versus Fallout 4, and I was like, oh boy. So I'm like, do I really want to get into
Yeah, this one's quick.
But I mean, again, I've started Infamous, and I'm already a month in, so
I love
haven't
that game,
really been. Yeah, I was surprised. So I haven't played the first 2.
Yeah,
my friend lent me this one just because I was looking for other things to play. I guess I had caught up on my backlog. He gives me about like 5 or 6 different games to play. I kind of pick my way through a couple. I already had a couple of indie games downloaded too. So I've been kind of just like going around and just trying different things, seeing what works for me, seeing what doesn't. And landed on Infamous, and so that's kind of my current playthrough right now.
Yeah, it might actually work out to your benefit. I mean, I played all the Infamous games, even though people will, call me names about Xbox and whatnot. I played all of those games, and I still really, really enjoyed Second Son and First Light, like all of them, man. I really, goodness gracious, that studio, Sucker Punch is so good, so talented. But yeah, I think for some people, they maybe were holding on to something with the first two games, and that might have detracted their opinion on the third one eventually. So yeah, it might actually work out to your benefit. And that's the kind of the thing that maybe you're kind of landing on here as we're getting a little bit older, Will, and we're getting closer to our walkers and whatnot. Is that the appeal of the 6-hour game is real, man? Like, it's something that I remember actually asking people on this show, because I've been doing this now for coming up on 6 years in December. And I remember asking people who were dads well before me, who had, kids 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And they're like some of their favorite games, and they were specifically looking for 3-4 hour games. And it's like, I didn't understand it, and it was one of those learning moments that I'm grateful that I have these conversations recorded, because I can listen back and just kind of think, I've really, at least my perspective has changed. I don't necessarily know how much I've grown. I'd like to think that I have, but my perspective has definitely shifted on that. I've appreciated different kind of outlooks on all those different things, where I just literally, the guy was telling me, my favorite games of the year are 3 hours, and I specifically ignore the epics so that I can play these ones. And it's like, well, I didn't get it, but yeah, man, that seems to be something. And I think it's just as the entire gamer base kind of ages, then that's really where you have all these different games that can live and survive and thrive, and developers can explore all these different things.
Well, and going back to what we were talking about earlier about the games that you're playing when you were a teenager versus when you were an adult.
Yes.
My high school years were dedicated a lot to playing online. Mm-hmm. I mean, because my friends and I, we all had the same schedule because of school. We'd come home, we'd put on Modern Warfare. We'd be playing that, or we'd be playing Halo 3. Yeah. We'd be playing that for hours, right? Red Dead 1 as well. I played a bit of that.
Yeah.
And then, I found as I got into college and then adult life that I didn't have as much time to play multiplayer. Mm-hmm. And then now, with a lot of the games that I've been playing, it's been mostly single-player, story-driven games.
Changes, man.
And that's where I tend to lean more towards. Like, that's not to say that I won't ever return to a multiplayer game like that, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to dedicate as much time to the multiplayer side of it as I would like to have back in the day.
There were moments, and again, like this, it's so funny if anybody were ever to go back and listen to all of these conversations, it'd be super embarrassing and cringeworthy, I'm sure, but also like my opinion and kind of stance on various games and what my approach, like I would often kind of, I don't know, this is one of the reasons I like podcasting. I want to get into like your journey as well. Like I like to just explore the idea, but then also try to like make sense of kind of my obsession, I guess, if that makes sense. Like, because at a certain point I wanted to have, like, I was all single player games, and it didn't even matter like what the length was particularly, but I just wanted something that would have like a beginning, middle, and end. And I remember talking about that for years and years. And then I've shifted into, maybe I don't even have time to finish something. And in which case, an endless experience actually became really appealing to me, where like it didn't matter if I played it for a half an hour or 6 hours. Like I actually wasn't getting any closer to the end. And for some reason that clicked in my mind, right? That's where Call of Duty actually came like way back into the forefront for me, because I just had no hope of finishing a game. So I'll just, play a little bit of multiplayer. So it's just really interesting that there's never really been a point in time, at least for me, on like an extended period of time where I've just stayed the same. I'm going for the exact same type of game. And my end realization is this: I'm open to anything, man. So, and life is changing for you too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am open to anything as well. What was I going to say? Do you find too that do you have a hard time playing multiple games that have different like control schemes or different, do you have a hard time going from something that's story driven to something that's more like a shooter?
I find I tend to bounce, or what I've and again, this is maybe just this point in time for me. 2021 is I have tried a couple of games. I'll kind of bounce to this and go like, okay, cool, I'll have a little taste, and then I'll land on something that I'm going to go all in on. That has been sort of like the pretty common theme, at least in 2021, where I did I've actually been finishing games, so that's been kind of exciting for me. But yeah, I don't really bouncing around, and if I couldn't be like all in on 2 games at once. I guess maybe to answer the question, like,
yeah,
and I don't know if it's the same for you. Like, how do you? I mean, now you got so many options. You kind of are able to explore a whole bunch at once. So, are you overloaded at all?
I possibly, but I don't definitely feel like I'm overloaded.
Well, that's good. Don't let me freak you out.
No, it's okay. I'm trying to think, because like I've always been the type of person, at least probably in my adult years now, if I'm putting one game on, if it's Ghost of Tsushima, I am all in on Ghost of Tsushima.
Yeah.
I have a hard time, unless it's something smaller. I can't be playing like a Ghost and Fallout. Like, I can't be playing 2 big games at the same time.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, totally.
I almost need, like, I guess you would call it like a palate cleanser, maybe something that's a little like one of the smaller indie games, like something something I've been kind of popping on every so often is like Enter the Gungeon.
Oh yeah.
And it's sort of just like I don't ever anticipate I'm going to beat that game, but it's just something to sort of just break up one big game from another big game, to just do like a quick, like, couple of play sessions. The one game that was like that for me back in the day, and it's going to top my list of like all-time favorite games of all time, Rock Band. I was heavy into Rock Band in high school, and even into college. I finished on Rock Band 3, but I spent basically all of my like part-time money on downloadable songs.
Yeah, man.
I have when I stopped downloading songs, I had about 950 songs on my game.
Get lost. Oh my, you were the whale for them, man. Like, you were the if anybody was ever asking why do they keep putting out songs, it's like, Will, I'm here, please.
But they're still doing it today too.
Yeah, I know.
I check back every so often, because I haven't been caught up with Rock Band 4, but a lot of the music that they've released now, it's the popular top 40 radio songs, which is weird.
Yeah.
For a company that was specifically making songs around, like, let's put out the new like Judas Priest album, or they'll put out like Guns N' Roses or something, and it's like,
I feel like one of the first ones I remember was like
I
feel like one of the first ones I remember was like Megadeth had a full album. And
they had 2.
Yeah.
They had 2 albums on the game.
And that was Rock Band as well, because I'm trying to remember if it was, I feel like it was Rock Band. They felt like they led on that DLC front, and the notion of just like getting a whole album, because it was always just like a single song or maybe 1 or 2 here and there, and they just went like, well, here's the whole damn thing. And it was almost, it must have been Rock Band, because Metallica was on Guitar Hero, and that was all about that one, dude. Like, it didn't matter. Like, it got to the point, I remember when Rock Band first came out, it's like, ooh, that's pretty pricey. Like, that was college days for me. I was definitely being a little mindful of stuff. But once the floodgates opened, like, once you kind of like let yourself just be open to the idea that like this guitar and game is going to cost you whatever it was, like $100 or something, it's like, all right, well, I guess I'll just get whatever the hell I need. I'm going to get all the drums and the pads and the, all the extra. There's so much money just like completely dumped into that franchise.
And that's the thing too. I still have my original drum set, the keyboard.
Same.
The drum set's got a big like hole in the red circles, but I take it with me wherever I go.
Yeah.
Right now, it's currently sitting covered up in my shed because I don't have any room in my place for it. Right,
and you can't bring yourself to get rid of it, right? Like, you just
maybe
one day. What system did you have it on? Was it PS3 or 360?
The 360.
Yeah, same. I mean, I guess I don't know what the backwards compatibility on that is. Like,
but that's also part of the reason why I didn't get Rock Band 4. Is because I went back to PlayStation 4. And I never got the Xbox One. If I got an Xbox One, I probably would have been able to carry it over. But I was like, you know what? Don't want to spend any more of my hard-earned money on the songs. I think I've that was my era where I was playing Rock Band. I think, if anything, I'll just pop it on once in a while with friends and just relive the good old days of a lot of the songs I still have.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, no, that was an interesting time.
That is a new one to go specifically to the other platform, so that your stuff doesn't go along with you. It's like Xbox seems to like work so hard to just like bridge the gaps between these consoles. You're like, I specifically do not want that bridge to be gapped or gap to be bridged. I don't want any of that stuff. I want to leave it all behind. That was old Will or young Will.
Exactly. No, my wife would not be happy with me if she knew that I was spending countless amounts of our hard-earned money on songs.
And it's either the money that's being spent or the noise. Like, these things, you get so lost in the game. It's one of those things that you just anybody who played Rock Band back in the day will remember just like that feeling. That's what was so special about it, especially if you played with friends. You're having such a good time and you were the music, you were the band. But if you weren't playing, and if you're just like walking in on that group of people, just like making a racket in that room, like it sounded disastrous, dude. It was just like thunk, thunk, thunk. And you're just like, but if you're playing it, you felt like you were making the music. Just a total disconnect.
Yeah. Me and my friends, we all played on Expert. We had our own little plastic rock band. We would get together, play everything on Expert. If we had a party and we had it set up, you'd have a couple of friends that are a little rusty. They're playing it on easy and over tapping on notes. And you're sitting there going like, oh, can I just get on right now so I can just...
No fail
everybody's
mode was
gonna
a
be
gift.
like, whoa, how do you hit all those notes so fast? And it's like, it's because I'm godly at the guitar,
musical.
man. I don't know what to tell you. Meanwhile, I don't know how to play a real guitar. So
did it ever make you want to learn? Like, did it ever like scratch that itch or push you in that direction at all?
I had my moments where I tried to pick up the guitar. I was always more akin to drums. I actually did drum lessons when I was a kid.
Oh, nice.
But then my parents kind of pulled me out because I guess, I don't know. It could have been more budgetary things for parents on their side.
Dude, same thing though, like with the noise factor, man. And I even sometimes listen to, whether it's on like YouTube shorts or whatever, like every now and then like a drummer will come up and it's like, man, you're really good. And that still is not like a sound I think I want to just hear in the house, Like it's just a racket. It really is.
Well, that's why I always like tell myself like, oh, maybe if I get my own garage one day, I'll put a drum set in there. And then I'm like, but am I going to play it often? Like, let's be real. Like, there's only so many hours in a day. And like, is that something that if I'm going to get into something, I have to really get into it. Right. And that was one of the things with podcasting is that I knew that if I was going to get into it, I had to be consistent with it. Because if I drop off for 1 week, 2 weeks, I'm done. Like I'm going to be hard to, get me back into that routine.
Well, you just missed a week. I don't want to see it, but you just did.
You know what? I will give myself a week sometimes. Because right now,
I'm just kidding.
I know.
Only because you brought it up. I wasn't even going to bring it up, but I'm like, I made a mental note. I'm like, don't bring up the week off. Don't bring up the week off. And then you did it. So I'm like, all right, well, I gotta at least.
Well, I'm sorry. That was just poor timing on my part.
No, that's but you do it solo. Like that's the commendable part about it. And there is, I feel like this show is probably like the easiest of it. Just like fire up a Skype call and just like chat with people and whatever. It is it's the solo part that can be tricky. Like I do solo like kind of intro for this, and then also exclusively for patrons, the Pants Patreon podcast. And it's like that is hard. Like that is definitely something I don't often talk about, but I was excited to have you on because it's like you do that every week, and that's your show. Like that is really tricky, man. So how have you, again, like just going over the challenges and the start and stops you've had in years past? Now you've chosen a format that. Yeah, you don't have to rely on other people, but it's a trade-off completely. Like you can't count on other people. You got no backup kind of thing. So talk to me about that.
I think it took till I finally got like consistent with making this podcast that I realized I'm not necessarily doing it for money. I'm not necessarily doing it for the views necessarily. It's the one thing in my life right now that it like. As long as I'm doing something creative, getting those itches scratched, you know what I mean? It's hard enough because, I'm in a field of work right now that I didn't go to school to do what I do now. Yeah. I did go to school for journalism. I did film and television as well. Oh, wow. But they're hard industries to get into. Sure. A lot of it is based in the city. The city is expensive to live in. So the commute is also, tenuous to do every week.
Where are you and what do you do? I actually don't know the answer. Where are you?
Oh yeah.
You're in Canada.
I'm in Ontario.
Okay.
Just outside of Toronto, basically, without doxing myself, I'd say.
What is your exact location? Well,
no, I'd say I'm about 10-15 minutes west of Brampton.
Okay.
Which is one of the major cities in the GTA out here. Kind of hard because we don't have like a consistent go train schedule, so I can't always commute to the city, but I do work in town, like where I live.
Yeah.
And so the commute right now is 10 minutes, which
That's
compared to what
nice.
I was doing back in the day, I was taking about an hour and a half there, an hour and a half back.
Good
Usually
God.
it involved transferring from a subway to a train, and the city always made me anxious too, just because it was just so busy.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't realize until I got older, like how much I do enjoy just the quiet and just the peace of coming home and not having to be around people all the time.
Right. Because you grew up in a busy city like that. That was kind of just always?
I did. I grew up in Mississauga, actually, just outside of Toronto. And yeah, compared to where I am now, it's stoplights every 2 feet. Like the speed limit's so like it restrictive. And I'm out in the country. I can go 80, 90 kilometers an hour and not hit a stoplight for like 10 minutes. It's great. I feel like
just space.
Yeah, it's just nice to get out and just, take in the fresh air, take in all the, all the country, all the just life out there, right?
Was that work and or family that sort of like made the change? Because I'm always interested in this. I likely will be in this exact, in my chair right here, I'll be here for the next 30 years, apparently. But I'm like, I live, 20, 25 minutes away from where I grew up. I am not going to be, I don't think, changing lifestyle in that sense. But when people do, I kind of like tap in, my ears perk up a little bit and as to like why and what was that like? Because I kind of talk about this often about growing up in school and not really understanding like truly the seemingly unlimited options there are for careers and even just like the way to go about life. That's why I love doing the shows, because I get to discover all these different things. So I'm curious, how did you come to like move away from the city into a little bit more like free open space, just living like a really different kind of day to day to your life?
Well, I'd say part of it was just, I think, I don't want to throw it all on my wife. I don't want to say, oh, my wife forced me to move out to the country. Like, she was born and raised in the area that I live. So that was part of it. I just wanted to be where she was for the most part.
There you go.
But I also felt like for my upbringing that I did feel like I lived a very kind of sheltered life. I did kind of feel like I wanted to get out from that and sort of just wherever I ended up, whether it be within the city or be out in the country, I just wanted to have my own space.
Yeah.
And just my own place to call home. It just so happened to be that we stayed comfortable out in the country, and I'm totally cool with it. Even if I were to continue to live here for the rest of my life, I can't imagine going back to Mississauga. As much as there's that pull, every time I go back to the city, it just, with all the construction and new buildings popping up, it doesn't feel like the same city. Yeah. So, and I guess that's how too, that you've spent enough time away from a city that it's like, doesn't really feel like home to you after a while. So it's like, okay, this is my home now, and I'm happy with it. And as long as like wherever we end up in the next couple of years, when we finally look to buy a home, could be even farther out from Toronto. Who the heck knows, depending on housing prices, right? As long as I've got my family with me, that's home, really. Right?
Dude, that sounds so gratifying. Like, and even like you really are like you're ear to ear. Like, you're really like, you seem good, man. And I wasn't sure what I was expecting, because again, like, you kind of do a little bit of I try to, at least, especially when it's we are strangers up until this point, I'm like, well, I'll try to find out what I can. And I'm actually kind of pleasantly surprised, to be honest with you. You seem very at ease, like you seem good. How are you?
Today was a hard day.
Yeah. Since you brought it up.
But let's be honest, Sean, I've been looking forward to this interview for a long time, right? And especially today, I knew it was happening. I wanted to make sure that everything was sort of set in place. I knew that after this, I have nothing to worry about. My day's basically done.
Is it?
I've been dealing with like issues with the car and everything like that. And it's like little things here and there that kind of get my anxiety going and have me sort of like I'm not in my right like headspace. And then I've been, especially in the last like month or two, really trying to sort of hone in before it gets really bad, just on what is bothering me. Yeah. Trying to do like regular like gratitude checks and just really appreciate what I have now, because in the sort of the situation that we're in, not everybody wants to live with their in-laws. Not everybody really wants to live in sort of a shoebox, and not have enough money saved up for a home yet, but still be working at it day to day, right? Obviously. And internet, that would be a nice thing to have, right? But I also then have to turn around and say, well, what do I have right now that is good? Well, I have a loving, supportive wife that is, she's my rock. She's my constant. I have the beautiful son who is, I've always wanted to have a family, right? So to have a son and to see he's like a little version of me, right?
Yeah.
And of course, I'm super appreciative to my in-laws, for giving us the space that we can create to sort of help save up to buy a home. And so, and I'm super appreciative of my job. Obviously I'm making money. I'm not destitute or anything like that. So it's things are going well.
Good for you.
And it's just sort of maintaining my sort of anxiety here and there. I'm not clinically diagnosed with anxiety or stuff, but I've had little anxious moments here and there, much like everybody does. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man.
So it's just one of those things that it's just, I was anxious when I first became a father because it was a new sort of thing in life. And then anything new that's thrown at me, I've just been kind of dealing with it and then just learning from it and then realizing I don't have to worry about it. You know what I mean? It's, I can't let every little thing, send me over the edge, because then I'm just not going to be doing anybody any good, right? To be just stressing all the time.
I think that is the thing that I'm picking up on here is you have adaptability. And this is always the thing when somebody tells me that they've moved from where they grew up, they moved away from that. It almost always coincides with this sense of whatever happens, and I'll just kind of deal with it. There's that always that seems to be a theme, and I think about Brock McLaughlin, who's one of my first guests on the show. He was a lot like that as well, moved around a lot and just that's a strength. That's a huge strength to be able to go, I guess we'll just figure it out, man. There's always going to be challenges, but I'm so glad to hear your self-reflectiveness and also, you put your ego aside and the gratitude for the in-laws, I actually think is something to really hold on to. I live maybe 8 minutes away from my mother-in-law and it's awesome, man. It's so good to be close to family. I haven't been in the same building as family for an extended period of time. But when something like that happens in your life, complete change, it's good to have somebody like that around, and I hope that's a good situation for you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we had our fair share of growing pains with living with them, you know what I mean? Because it's their space and we're kind of in their space now with a baby. Yeah. So there's been a lot of adjusting to that.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
But it's, you know what, we always figure it out. And, I love them like my own parents, obviously, because they're basically parents now to me.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
But yeah, it's, I will always be super appreciative at the end of the day, but it's one of those things that as we're living in their space, and then creating our own little space within that space, it's just boundaries are very important, but also
for sure
we want to feel as though we can call the place that we're at home and not have to, worry about oh, I don't want to overstep in certain places. Because right now we're also one big concern. We only have one shower in the house, so we're all using the same shower.
Oh my God, Will, that is devastating.
And
gosh,
the first couple of months, I was always coming upstairs with my little towel and clothes and be like, "Do you mind if I take a shower now? Can I?" And I still kind of do that sometimes, but now I'm just kind of oh wait, this is my home. I mean, as long as nobody's in the shower, I'll just pop in.
I would be the same way. I would be absolutely the exact same way. What about at work? Could you shower at work? And also, actually, I mean, that's a whole other thing. I don't need to get into exactly where you're bathing. But you're putting in the time, right? You mentioned before, you're working 12-hour days, 5 days a week. You're busting your tail. This is because of is it the goal of having the house? It's motivation with the family and everything. That's all really driving you right now.
When I started at this job, it was to help pay down a lot of debt that we had accumulated.
Yeah.
But yeah, now it's definitely, I when I started at this job, I was just kind of a regular grunt worker, I guess you would say, just kind of on the floor. In 3 years, I've worked my way up to a supervisor position.
Yeah.
So I've kind of put in time, and it's just, it was the first job I felt like, you know, you do good work and you're rewarded in a certain way, whether it be with,
I love that,
you know, with, and that was always my goal, was I want to be in a environment where I feel like I can grow within the company and that they're willing to challenge me, because I've always felt as though, and not, you know, not to put it mean like this, but there are some places that kind of take advantage of workers, right?
Oh, yeah.
If they know that they have a good worker, and as long as they don't, you know, talk to their boss and ask for a raise or anything like that, that it's like, oh, well, they'll just continue to keep just piling more and more on them.
Yeah.
Right? And now I'm in a position where I have to run a shift of like 5 or 6 other guys, and you're learning to deal with different guys and what makes guys tick. And we have some guys that are fairly quiet, but they do the work and they're good workers. But it's just dealing with all that. And now I have to sort of be the fixer for a lot of problems. and it's like, oh, so if something goes wrong, I'm to blame now.
Yep.
Oh, darn. Like, so that's been an adjustment. But I always kind of saw myself in a role like this. And I've always tried to push for this kind of role.
Good for
and
you.
I think even with my past endeavors creatively, when I was doing like my old podcast and working with friends and stuff like that, I always kind of took the sort of de facto leader role. Just because I mean, I don't know. I just felt like that was just something that I could excel at, I guess, because I always saw myself, and I still see myself, as an introvert. And so this was one area where, okay, I can, if I'm introverted and stuff in my personal life, I can come here and throw a mask on and be extroverted, be a leader, be able to, you know, use my voice and speak up and, you know, have something to say. So
gamers will rise up, man. Gamers in leadership positions. You know, I was talking to my team earlier today about, like, I gamify everything. You know, it's like everything's leveling up and everything's like doing, you know, evolving and everything like that. And it's funny how that seems to be the case. And also, I think as Finn gets a little bit older too, you'll probably find like the striking similarities between like managing a team and like raising a family kind of a thing. It's just like, it just becomes, at least for me, it's become like abundantly clear. And sometimes I have to watch myself to not be like condescending to my team, where it's like it's like teaching somebody to walk in certain cases, like at least in depending on the level that you kind of are managing. In some cases, like I have to tell my kid this 5 times over. I have to tell my staff this thing like 5 times over. You know, and
that's what people ask me. They're like, "What's your job like?" And I'm like, "It's just like glorified babysitting."
It's people,
essentially.
It's that's tricky, man. So tell me about the podcast, though. The Outbreak Podcast you've been doing. I was listening to a little bit, running down like the PlayStation news and everything like that. Like, how has it been? You're doing it on your own. Like, like, what's that journey been like, and where do you see that going?
Well, when it started, I didn't exactly know what I wanted to do. I thought it was going to be something that, maybe I'm, and I've made this kind of joke on a couple of podcasts where it's like, I'm eventually going to evolve into like interviewing a guest every episode, kind of like what you do for this podcast, right?
Sure.
But then I
used to take great offense to that, by the way. I'm perfectly fine with it if that's what you want to do.
But I've always been interested in reaching out to and talking to people within the space, this creative space, right? But I've always been sort of holding myself back. And I think it's just, I've been kind of giving excuses like, well, I don't have the best work set up. So if the internet like craps out or something, then the interview is a bust. Or I can't do it at home because I have no internet. So I'm always kind of putting up these walls and putting up excuses to do that. But I'd say, to answer that second question you gave, like, that's kind of where I see myself going with it. I would like to eventually evolve into interviewing subjects within the space or whatever story I'm talking about, getting sort of a voice to sort of also run down their thoughts with me on that.
For sure.
But right now, it's just been, so the podcast, I tend to focus on gaming news, like entertainment news. So that could be like movies, television, that sort of broader, it's a very broad sort of entertainment podcast in that way. And throughout the week, I will be, reading, trying to look for interesting stories to talk about, or timely stories, if you will.
Yeah.
And funny enough, of course, this last episode I recorded, which was discussing the PlayStation Showcase, was supposed to be recorded last week. But as you know, there was no podcast last week. And that was sort of for personal reasons. I just kind of sat down, looked at the wall, and was like, I just don't feel like recording a podcast today.
Yeah, I thought that was bold, man. I thought that was really good. I thought that was, that's a decision for you and for you alone, really. Like, that's sort of the freedom that you get when you do something by yourself, too.
And I sort of talk about it on my last episode, too, because I said to myself, like, I'm sort of in a position that I don't want to come to the table and record something and not feel like I'm like in it all the way. You know what I mean? And I've gone into some episodes where I've recorded it, and when I turn it off, I'm like, oh my God, that sucked. That was like my worst performance,
Those are going to happen though. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like that's absolutely going to happen. And also you're always going to be your own worst critic. And I feel like I'm talking to myself like a couple of years ago, it's just whatever. The more you let go of that, and then honestly, I feel like for me, it was just like mileage, just like reps and episode. Like I think I was just checking it. I think this is like episode, like there's 260 some odd episodes on this feed, and it's just insane. And after a while, I don't know. It's funny. You just stop worrying about that stuff. I don't know. So yeah, like but doing it by yourself is tough, man. It's really tricky.
Yeah. And I'd say like, I think I probably am closing in on 50 episodes now.
Good on you, dude.
And, I still have those sort of like mental hiccups here and there where I'm kind of like, oh, I don't know if this was good or not. But I'd say compared to last year around this time,
exactly.
like my own comfort level with like my own voice, my speaking voice, and just sometimes just kind of, being lighthearted with it and I'm not taking it so seriously a lot of the time. I'm doing this. I want to be able to say like, I can listen to this and enjoy it for myself. And if I know that I enjoy it, somebody else will enjoy it when they pop it on. And then it came to, I was sharing this with friends and stuff, but then people at work started coming up to me and saying that like, oh, I just listened to your last episode. And I was like,
cool, man.
Oh, and that feeling is cool. So it's like, I'm doing it for me. I'm doing it for those people that I talk to that still listen.
Yeah.
I'm also a part of a very nice podcaster community on Discord as well, to where I just, in a way, like networking and sort of, talking to different people with different types of podcasts on various subjects and just finding my niche there as well. But also, the one thing that I do struggle with when it comes to, like, I can record the podcast, I can edit it, that's fine. It's just the social media side of it.
No doubt.
For one person, it's just like, oh, it's tough to really, want to post something every single day. And I'm not the most social person. I don't know if you've noticed, but like even on like Discord, I'm pretty quiet.
Yeah.
I will pop up once in a while, but I am pretty quiet. And that's something I'm also trying to work on, but I'm also at a point now where I'm just kind of letting myself be. I think I was a little too hard on myself for a while. Like you don't have to, really, like, if you have something to say, then you say it. But if you don't, pretend like, don't go on a platform and then just post gibberish if you don't mean it or you don't like feel like it needs to be said. So, if there's a conversation that's happening, I'll chime in if I have something to say to it. Or if I just want to share an article or share something here and there, I will. Otherwise, I don't know, across all the Discord servers that I'm on, like there's plenty of stuff to read and follow along. And if I'm feeling good that day and I feel like being social, I am. Otherwise, I just kind of, doing my thing.
Well, and
it goes trying to focus on my content, right? So
yeah, it goes back to kind of like what we were talking about before, in that there's so many different just like ways, so many different paths in life, like just so many different like ways to approach it. And I think even on social media, like it just extends to that. It seems like even more so that there's like this hyper focus, like you got to do step 1, step 2, step 3, then you are growing on social, like equal success kind of thing. And it's just like, it's because it can become very formulaic and very numbers based and all that kind of stuff. It's like not really natural, like if that's not where you find yourself doing, it's probably because it's not really natural. I don't think to most people to like do tactic number 1 for social media and then roll on to tactic 2. It's like, that's just not how our brains are really evolved, I don't think. That's what I've really come to appreciate from a lot of people is just all these different ways of being. And if you've already kind of reached that state, then like, dude, I think that speaks to a lot of your calm that I'm experiencing tonight, man. Talk to me about this podcast community though, on Discord though. What was that you kind of briefly mentioned?
Yeah. So it was one of those things. I knew when I was jumping into this podcast that I wouldn't feel as though I had achieved some form of success if I had not reached some new audience.
Sure.
I could share it with friends and family on Facebook and Twitter until the cows come home. But I knew that I wanted to build a community. I wanted to find people who were also doing podcasts or also had similar interests.
Why did you want to do that? Why did you want to find a community or build a community? Like what's the why there?
I think with, of course, my own friends, like I have friends in my personal life who game and stuff like that, but nobody that really does what I do, like podcasting and writing and that sort of thing. So I felt like I almost had to find that elsewhere. Yep. So that's when I found I was shifting online. Yeah. And I hadn't really thought to do that. I don't know why, but I guess up until last year when I don't even remember how I stumbled upon this community. I guess I was in another Discord server and somebody found me and started talking to me, and then they recommended me to this podcaster community Discord. And that's where I just started chatting every day. I was sort of meeting new people there and made some friends along the way, and just been promoting my podcast there as much as I can and trying to just keep it up with the conversation, even though it's a community of like-minded individuals who all want to create content, different types of content, right? And it's not all gaming related. Well, there may be some there, but I also found too that with a couple of the other gaming podcasts that are out there, like including yours, I was also a big fan of 4Player Podcast. I don't know if you've heard of that one. They're based out in Austin. They were like the big podcast I listened to that got me into podcasting.
That's awesome. Yeah.
They have their own Discord community. So I wanted to be a part of all these different communities and see what people were talking about.
Yeah.
So I jumped into to your community. I jumped into Press YYZ, who's also located here in Toronto, 4Player Podcast. And I'm just trying to mingle, trying to network here and there when I'm able to, like now that I'm at least in the door. Yeah. It's really up to me in my own time to be like, okay, well, I'm going to reach out and talk to somebody now. A lot of the time it's like with my schedule, it's just hard for me to, like I have Discord on my phone, so I could shoot a text here and there, but it's hard for me mentally sometimes to just be like, oh, there's so many conversations happening. It's almost overwhelming.
And that's why I'm like, that's why I feel like an old man sometimes. I'm like, I just need a keyboard. Like, I just need to get off my damn phone. I need a keyboard. How can anybody keep up? Like, I'm terrible at typing on my phone. And, but I think many of us really are. I really tapped in on that answer, man. I know that I interrupted you a little bit, but I was like, I want to dig in a little bit there to understand that. And that was an actual like perfect response. Honestly, like totally warmed my heart about it, because that's what so many of us do want, is exactly what you said. There's friends who are kind of into it, but it's like, you don't quite get it. And there's this, my friend N64 Josh talked to me about like this abundance on the internet. There are so many people, and whatever you're into, like whether it's like the weird stuff that we're kind of into in games, or if you're like hyper into sports or whatever you're into, like you can find your people, and that is so individual to every person. And so some people might say like, just go find another community, but like your response to that is so like, it resonates with me big time, that you want to find your own and build your own thing. Like it kind of speaks to kind of what you're talking about before about like somehow you're always the one taking the lead on stuff. Like, well, if somebody else isn't going to do the project or the whatever, then I guess I'll have to do it as well. And if somebody hasn't already created the community that like really quite clicks for you, it seems to me that like that is a totally natural outcome, that you would fire up your own podcast and start up your own community. Like it just, I don't know. Have you ever kind of like reflected on like the parallels there, or like maybe it's just part of this conversation that this has come up? It seems clear as day to me.
So what, start my own community?
Yeah, it's just that this is all part of like that. This is so consistent, actually, just with like you and your inclinations and into what you're into and what you do. It all seems very like it makes sense. There's nothing quite. I don't know. There's not like not that I'm like looking for flags or anything, but it's like everything just makes it. It's just consistent. I don't know how else to describe it. Like it's very Will, man. Like you've got it. That's part of your brand. I think is just creating some sort of space for you to, I don't know, it's, like I said, it's like what a lot of us do, but you doing the work is really it. Like I just get a sense of drive from you big time.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier too about, and I actually kind of reflected on this a couple of months ago, because I looked back and I thought to myself, like, man, where would I be if I didn't have the podcast?
Exactly.
What would I be doing? And I'm like, well, I'd probably just trade that in with maybe doing YouTube content or maybe writing like short stories.
Sure.
I was always kind of flip-flopping between those. Like I haven't always been a podcaster. Like I probably kind of mentioned earlier, but I did have an old podcast I did with friends like several years ago. We stopped doing it around like 2016, 2017 when I moved away. Yeah. Because it was an in-person podcast. So it just became harder to always meet in person.
Yeah.
And this was before like Zoom really took off and Discord, and we weren't really into any of those. But I kind of transitioned away from that to writing. I would go back and do my blog, and I would build a calendar there, and I would write content and just for myself and maybe anybody who was interested. If I posted it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever, like I'm just basically with this podcast now, it's just something to scratch the itch. And if anybody responds back and says that they like it, then I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Like then it gives me a reason to continue to do it.
For sure.
But at the same time, if I were to stop doing this tomorrow, I know that a part of me is always going to be like, well, I want to get back into this, or I want to get back into that. Like if I'm not doing something, then I feel like there's just a hole that needs to be like filled in that space. And again, it's that realization that I realized, like, I don't need to be paid to do this. Yeah. If I'm enjoying doing it, that's all that matters.
Yeah, there's a very warm and clear kind of flow to you. Well, like it just seems like you're, I don't know, doing everything for the right reasons and getting all the gratification. But you know, there's challenges to everything. It's not like any of this is easy. But every now and then I'll get the question too of like, if I stopped podcasting, or if this wasn't like my main hobby, what would I do? And you touched on something like that I actually hadn't thought of in a long time. But this is why I appreciate your clear flow that you've got going. Where I'm like, it took you saying this for me to even think about it, is writing short stories. I totally would be right there with you, man. If I wasn't doing this, I do think that I would probably get a little tired of just playing games just to play games. Like if I wasn't talking about them, I honestly don't know that I would spend an equivalent. I don't know that I would replace podcasting time or content creation time with playing time. I would probably replace that time with some other form of, probably some sort of writing, and then still have my, limited hours for gaming. I honestly don't know that I would increase that. Yeah.
And I started writing short stories when I was 8 in like elementary school. And I've always done that. Not as much now, because I find transitioning into an adult, the imagination that I had when I was a kid at just making stories has almost just like, I almost need to put some form of realism into everything that I write.
Right.
And it really bogs down like my ability to just go out there with stories and to be descriptive and stuff like that.
So you're on the straight and narrow. There's no hallucinogenic, no drugs involved here, man.
No. I've never tried, mixing drugs and writing stories, or even alcohol and writing stories. I've never thought to try that.
Well, I don't want you to purge yourself on the podcast at all. But one thing that I will say, and again, like it's so interesting being sort of like on the other side of the call here now, where I remember getting, unsolicited sort of, I don't even know if it's necessarily advice, but it's just sort of like for me with my kids, I've kind of talked about this on the show, or one of the shows at one point, where I'm like, I had this like amazing realization as I was walking around with Lincoln, my son, and he was shaking trees, pretending it was Animal Crossing. Like his imagination was just like, oh yeah, like that's what being a kid is like. It was like this revival of something that had been kind of quiet and ignored, maybe is the best way to put it. Like, it's almost like an actual like kid inside. I played Psychonauts as well, so there's maybe a little bit of this happening of like the little kid in my brain was there, but I'm just like, I've got bills to pay, I've got work to do, I've got other things. I'm just like, in a minute. And I kind of had that realization I shouldn't be shoving that thing, whatever it is, that part of me away, when I saw Lincoln like shaking trees, like just going, enjoying life and laughing his ass off at just like things that really aren't that funny, but like, who cares? Let's go have a good laugh. And that is the true, at least in this moment, as I'm talking about, that is one of the truest joys of being a dad, is just seeing your kids like discover things and maybe reawakening that imagination, that creativity that's been in you this whole time, a little quieter the last couple of years.
It's been such a joy to watch him grow up too. And I always appreciate the time that I do have between working, podcasting, when I do get that one-on-one time with him. There's never any distraction. Like I don't put TVs on to distract him. I just kind of let him play with whatever he can get his hands on, except for cat food. He always seems to go for, he makes a beeline for the cat food, and he knows that I don't let him near it.
What a tyrant.
Like last weekend, I was sitting on the couch, and the cat food bowl is probably like 3 feet away from me. And he saw it. He looked at me. Then he looked back at it, and just all of a sudden, that was the fastest I'd ever seen him crawl. Was just going right for that cat food, and I'm like, nope, and just redirect him towards something else. But
he knows it's forbidden.
I watch him pick up the any of the toys and just kind of turn them around in his hand, kind of like examine them, and I'm wondering like what's going through his head? What's he thinking when he's looking at these toys? He takes this little toy pan and just starts kind of tapping his head, like, sure. What is he doing? What is he thinking when he's doing that? But most of the time, like, he's just having fun with whatever, and I can always get him to laugh and smile. And regardless of how bad a day that I've had, whatever has been stressing me out, to come home to been smiling, laughing, that just like washes everything away, even for a few moments. You know what I mean? That's one of the joys of parenthood, really. Like, I know when he gets older, he's probably going to go through a lot of terrible twos, or even the angsty teen, like that.
Don't worry about that yet, man. Whatever, you're in the moment, dude.
And that's the other thing with my, anxiety and stuff, is I can't look that far ahead. I can't always wonder about the what ifs behind the corner. I just have to live in the now. And that's just sitting down on the floor with him as he's playing, and playing with him, crawling around the floor. Like, that's what matters now.
I'm going to have to remember that game, because I've done it before, but I've never actually, I don't think, heard it expressed in that way of, if I ever need like a grounding moment, if I ever need like, I'm worried about something else, I should just like look at my kids and go like, what is going through their minds right now? It's usually when they're doing something just ridiculous, but like, what do you think about all day? You know what I mean? Like, it is a different world in there, dude. It's awesome.
It's the curiosity, and endless curiosity. Like, we've now put all the safety locks on all of our drawers in the kitchen and everything, because he's trying to get into everything. And it never stops. Even if you tell him, you can't tell him no, because he's like, well, I'm just going to continue to do it because I want to know, and I want to get into things, and I want to discover things. Right. Yeah. So you almost can't get mad at him for doing that, because this is all part of him learning the world around him. So I'll gently redirect him away from cat food. It's not like a big deal. He will come to understand that obviously grabbing the cat food and putting it in his mouth is not the best thing for him. I was going to say,
that might be a lesson just best learned, and then you never have to worry about it ever again. Will, I have to say, man, I've had such a great time chatting with you tonight. It's one of those things where I almost want to like put a reminder in my phone or my calendar or something. I want to check in on this episode at this point in time, and in a year's time go like, where are you at? How are you doing? Like, I feel like you are like absolutely on the right path, dude, for just so many amazing things to be happening for you. You're going to have a 1.5-year-old. You're going to, who knows what's going on with the life situation, with the job, like all these things. It's just like, I don't know. Like, do you feel like, it seems like you're just on like this pivot point. You're on the precipice of big, or at least many changes, dude.
I definitely feel as though we are moving in the right direction,
Good
albeit,
for you.
It's going to be slow and steady, but I know based on our history, based on how far we've come, that we're going to get there.
Yeah, man.
And so that's really all that matters. And again, it's about the just not stressing about what's to come and just sort of living in the moment and just continuing to practice that. That's what I just keep telling myself, to just keep grounding myself, as you said, right? So I would be curious to know too, in a year from now, I'd probably, if you ever called me back on, I'll listen to the last episode and be like, wow, I was hopefully a completely different person and that I am in a much better place then, but it's one of the true blessings of podcasting, is this time capsule thing that sort of like happens. Like, this is the moment right now. It's bottled up, and we'll throw it in the ground for a year, and then we'll kind of like look back in a while. And I always, like, at least for me, and I want to throw it back to you before we kind of close things out here. Yeah.
Like, after so many episodes of doing this, I get to kind of reflect on that quite often. And I don't know, well, I'll just quickly turn it back to you in terms of like, when you finish recording a podcast, like, how do you feel? Like, when you hit stop, like, generally speaking, like, how do you feel? Especially given that you do it for a variety of reasons, of building the community is something you've always wanted to do. Like, what kind of like atmosphere is in you when you stop recording your solo show?
Well, I'd say one part, relief that it's done. Yeah, I guess. I mean, I always look forward to the editing. Surprisingly, I enjoy that part. But depending on what I'm talking about in the episode, because a lot of the time I just have like a lineup of different stories to talk about. I don't write a script really for anything I'm going to discuss, so it all kind of comes to me as I go. If I turn the episode off and I sit there and I think to myself, like, that was good. If I can find that I'm cracking a few jokes here and there, and sort of my end cap where I kind of shout to socials, because there's I think one episode that I recorded recently, I think it was episode 45. I said to myself at the end, I'm like, this is the best episode that I have recorded to date. Yeah. Like, I had so much fun recording that episode. And I'm like, but I know that I will have another episode like that in the future. And that's the one thing I don't always have those like, oh, wow moments, but I do have a lot of moments where I'm like, that was good. That felt good. And so, yeah, would I absolutely love to have those, oh, wow, that was great moments every time? Absolutely. It doesn't happen. But I mean, it always feels good to sit down and have it done, and to be like, I've shown up for another week. And I'm not stopping.
That's more what the question was surrounding, and that's one of those. I'm gonna have to make sure that I look back in a year's time, ask you the exact same question about that, because and I don't want to change your answer, because the answer you gave is the truest response to it. But it was. I'm gonna acknowledge just a little bit that it was focused on the content, and what I'd love to just like get back to you in a year and go like, I wonder what your response would be to what's your atmosphere after you're done recording, and wonder if it's still on the quality of the content or if it's something else. You know what I mean? So, and you kind of got there near the end, but yeah, man, I'm intrigued by you. I don't know what it is, dude. Like, I don't know. I just want to, I guess some of it is, very reflective of myself a couple of years ago on almost every front, man. Just like, you got your goals set, you got your podcast, you've got your kid, you're focused on your family, like you're doing the stuff. So that's very, give me a couple flashbacks here for sure, dude. Do you want to go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you on the internet, all your stuff, and direct them to the right places? Sure. Yeah. So, the Outbreak Podcast, you can find, I'm on basically all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Well, Instagram is just my personal account. But yeah, the Outbreak Podcast, you search it on any of the listening platforms like Apple, Spotify, Google, should be able to come up. And try to
avoid the COVID podcasts. Just look for the logo that looks like a spray paint, basically.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Nice, man. Well, again, yeah, thank you so much for carving out time. I know it's late over there, and somehow, making the space at your work. I have a huge amount of appreciation for our chat tonight, dude.
Oh, thank you so much. And hopefully the plant behind me is not on fire as I go back to work now. So.
That would be bad. Okay, so for those of you guys keeping track at home, and of the ideas that I seem to just come up with during these conversations, they're starting to add up here a little bit. They're starting to pile up. We've got trading cards. I think there's been talk about a comic book at some point. Now they're talking about I'm writing a book. I don't know. It's just kind of just life in general, and I guess life as a podcast are similar. Just as you get a little bit older, you start to reflect on things a little bit differently. And for me, just capturing this moment in time, which while I'm in it, it seems like it's lasting for a long time. But I'm gonna look back on this in decades to come, hopefully, and go, that was a cool pocket of time of my life. I don't know. I guess I'm just not taking for granted that I can do this forever, and I want to, while it's fresh, do a little something with it. But anyways, hopefully you guys really enjoy that. I just, man, working all the hours, doing it for the family, doing all the things, doing what's required. William Key, please support the man. All the links are in the show notes, you guys. That's the best thing. I try to keep the show notes pretty clean. We've got our patrons, of course. All the links you need to do, just go in the show notes, click all the links, follow the people. And you can support this show if you're not already. You can follow me on Twitter at Sean Capri, Sean like Connor, Capri like the pants. You can go to patreon.com/YouMeCapri. You support this show, the Xbox Drive, the PlayStation Drive, the Nintendo Drive, the RPG Cave. You get Sweet Hangs as an exclusive now. Donnie and I are going to record that right away. Should be in the feed pretty soon here. And a ton of reviews. We are now in the thick of review season here. Bunch of stuff coming to the PlayStation Drive, the RPG Cave. Stuff I'm playing Tales of Arise right now. I'm going to be wrapping that up. I'm going to be joining Ryan and Matt on a review discussion for that. So stay tuned, guys. And thank you so much for listening. Did I say that already? Thank you guys so much for listening. We end the show with this weird bit from Heavy Rain. Signals the end. I don't have a good way to say it other than bye-bye. Thank you guys so much for listening. And I'll see you next time. Okay, take care.
Jason! 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 Sean! 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 Sean, where are you? Jason! 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 Sean! 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 Jason! 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 Jason!